A house truly haunted. I got married in 2012. We moved into our first home. It wasn't per se old. It fit the homes in the neighborhood. Nevertheless, from the first night I spent there, I could sense something wasn't right. Choosing to watch Lovely Molly that first night didn't help either. I just always had an eerie feeling like something or someone was near me. At night, I began to hear footsteps in my wife's makeup room. I'd sometimes go upstairs to see why she was pacing for so long, and always found her asleep in bed. At one point, I entered the makeup room late at night. A black crayon we didn't even own rolled across the floor from some dark corner of the room, the corner that was always darker than the rest, and the one I always felt eyes coming from. Fast forward 1 month, a bunch of friends were over for my wife's friend's birthday. We watched a scary movie in the dark. After we shut off all the lights, TV, everything, and my ex started talking about how I thought the place was haunted, and how she believed it to be BS. Just at that moment, directly behind her friend, a frame picture of us fell forward onto the table. Not fell, but more like angrily slapped. Everyone shrieked, and then we all laughed. I laughed too, but more so to give off the impression that I wasn't scared. We got married and moved into our house in September 2012. In October, I started having what I thought were strokes. At the time, I was using a supplement which contained something called 1,3-dimethylamine hydrochloride, basically a fancy way to say meth without the FDA breathing down their necks. It was called Jack 3D. I'm sure many of you exercise freaks remember it. The doctors figured that was my problem and told me to stop. So I did. The panic attacks persisted. I went to the ER 11 times and saw 7 cardiologists. Funny thing is, these attacks only occurred in that house. It got to a point where even my ex would say, "You know, I'll be having a great day, but as soon as I walk in this house, I feel horrible." I took that as maybe she was just feeding off of my negativity. But I agreed. Something in there wasn't happy with us. We shouldn't have been there. The rest is short and concise. It had been months, maybe 4. Things would fall off the wall. We had a plate attached to some hooks in the wall which said something about how a home is only a home with love, or some Hallmark bullshit. It was thrown halfway across the room. It shattered. We'd come home to find pictures all over the floors. Toilet paper unraveled. Her explanation of this was that our 4-pound teacup Pomeranian did it. There is no way in hell that he stood on his hind legs for a minute straight and unraveled a toll of toilet paper that was way too high for him anyway. And those footsteps, those incessant footsteps, never ending. The most terrifying moment was in late winter. My puppy was in my lap, and something caused him to stand at attention. His muscles were tense and solid as concrete. Unmoving, tail pointed to the ceiling. I heard the footsteps again. Only this night, they were especially active. I felt that the sanctity of our house was truly threatened. Henry growled just as the steps moved from the room to the hallway, and then down the stairs into the living room. I didn't even try to look. I grabbed Henry and we ran out of the front door and just watched the monolithic bricked entity leer down at me with those foreboding second-story windows as eyes and a yawning, aghast mouth for a door. Desperation. The basement was the worst part of the house. We both were terrified of it, and she would never go down there without me. Finally, we got what we were looking for. Irrefutable proof before both of our eyes that something not of this earth was with us, and that we needed to leave. Her stepdad and mom came over. My stepdad-in-law sat on the couch watching football. They were in the kitchen. We had a hanging plant in the dining room. Mind you, as this was all occurring, we had the front door open so some air could get in through the glass screen door. So she's chatting with her mom about whatever. Suddenly, the flower pot began swinging. And I mean swinging, very forceful. I swear even the wind from a terrible thunderstorm couldn't have gotten it to do this. My ex yelled out my name. I walked in and watched. Back and forth, back and forth. Something was pushing it. Finally, her mother had enough, and being the tough woman she was a captain at a jail after all. She screamed, "Whoever you are, you need to leave this house. It no longer belongs to you." The swinging slowly halted to a stop. Then I turned around. The front door was slowly shutting on its own. No breeze, no wind. It didn't shut all the way, but just that creaky sound is enough to give anyone the heebie-jeebies. Within a few weeks, things started to get better, happier, but it didn't stay that way. It started all over again, only much fiercer and uglier. The moment that made us consider really moving again was one night in the kitchen. We were making something, and suddenly there was knocking on the wall. No joke, I have no other way to put it, literal knocking. Not hard or angry, very quaint, like a Jehovah's Witness. It scared us so much I almost spilled a pan full of burning grease all over me. The negativity came back. The footsteps came back. In that basement, it was akin to walking into the rung of hell. We moved out after a year. I drove past that house a few times later on after we'd been gone. Didn't notice anything. Except once. I slowly crept by and pulled over in front one evening. It wasn't light or dark, almost dusk. I was staring at something in the living room window. Curtains, perhaps. Something caught my eye. Then, one of the curtains brushed to the side, and I saw a face. My heart skipped, and I was frozen. I actually jumped in my seat. No lights on inside. This is no BS. I looked closely. It may sound funny now, but it wasn't then. It looked like someone was in the Revolutionary War. The entity had white hair like an old powdered wig, a painting from the 18th century. Just like the wig that Washington has on in all of his portraits. It looked at me still, very, very still, and rigid. I couldn't make out much of the face, nor the eyes, which looked like little black buttons. Its expression was very droll, like the way your white-haired grandmother would give a child a death stare for stealing out of the cookie jar. Kind of like, "You do that again, you're in for it." Eerily, it gave me a look like it recognized me and was telling me, "Don't come near this house." I put the car in drive and we watched each other as I drove away from a house with no cars in the driveway and a for sale sign on the lawn. I went home and told her. She said I was lying. That was until 3 years later. Her cousin's friend, who lived on that very same street, aptly named Washington Avenue, told her that people would frequent that home and move out quickly. She never connected the dots. She said it was because there were projects not far down that road. I knew otherwise. All these years later, it spooks the hell out of me that we were in there with that thing I saw the entire time. Why didn't it show itself to me before? Had I seen it, or had either of us seen it prior to moving in, we wouldn't have. To this day, that year was one of the most powerful, disturbing points of my life. I'd also like to note that in the house I grew up in, which is the place my dad died in, I literally saw his ghost sitting in his favorite living room chair in the middle of the night. I'd never been so scared. This experience dwarfed that beyond all recognition.